Cup final enthusiasm prevails in Berlin when England meet Germany on the soccer field. All the courtesies are observed before the start. God Save the King is played.
Imagine a World Cup engulfed not by cheers, but by the shadows of a looming war. The year is 1942, and the world's most celebrated football tournament finds itself in the grips of global conflict. This is the story of a World Cup that never was, a tale entwined with the echoes of history and the dreams of nations. Let's embark on a journey back to the early years of the World Cup, unraveling a narrative where sport and history collide in dramatic fashion. The World Cup phenomenon and its early years. The FIFA World Cup, a quadrennial festival of football, has captivated millions since its inception. This journey through time begins in the 1930s, a period marked by rapid changes in both the sporting world and global geopolitics. It was a time when the World Cup was still finding its feet, an infant in the world of international sports, yet it was poised to become the global phenomenon we know today. The story of the World Cup is inseparable from its creator, Jules Rimet, the visionary FIFA president. Under his guidance, the idea of an international football tournament transformed from a mere dream into vivid reality. The inaugural World Cup kicked off in 1930 in Uruguay, a daring venture given the challenges of long-distance travel at the time. Despite these obstacles, the tournament was a resounding success, capturing the hearts and imaginations of people worldwide. Uruguay's victory in the 1930 edition, a symbol of football's unifying power. The tournament saw participation from countries across different continents, heralding the beginning of a new era in football where boundaries faded, and the sport became a bridge connecting diverse cultures. The subsequent editions in 1934 and 1938, held in Italy and France respectively, witnessed the World Cup's growing stature. Italy's back-to-back victories in these tournaments underlined their dominance in the sport, while the events off the pitch mirrored the shifting tides in the world at large. The 1934 World Cup in Italy was particularly significant, as it was the first to involve a qualification process, reflecting FIFA's commitment to making the tournament truly global. These early years also saw the World Cup become a stage for showcasing national pride and prowess. The 1938 tournament in France was notable for its heightened political undertones, coming at a time when Europe was on the brink of war. The games were played against the backdrop of rising tensions and emerging ideologies, adding a layer of complexity to the tournament's narrative. It was during this era that the World Cup began to evolve from a mere sporting event into a powerful cultural and political symbol. The tournament's ability to bring nations together on a common platform was both its greatest strength and a point of vulnerability, as it became increasingly entangled with the political currents of the time. The World Cup's journey through the 1930s also highlighted the evolution of football itself. The sport was undergoing significant changes, with new tactics and strategies emerging. Teams like Italy's Azzurri and Austria's Wunderteam were pioneering new approaches to the game, enchanting audiences with their skill and strategic prowess. Amidst this backdrop of change and excitement, the World Cup's future was cast into uncertainty by the outbreak of World War II. That disrupted the tournament's schedule, but also posed existential questions about the role of sports in a world torn apart by conflict. The decision to cancel the 1942 World Cup was a reflection of these tumultuous times, marking a pause in the tournament's young history. Europe on the brink, the prelude to cancellation. As the 1940s dawned, Europe found itself on a precipice, with the ominous clouds of war gathering rapidly. This was a period of profound geopolitical shifts, which would ultimately lead to the cancellation of the 1942 FIFA World Cup. To understand this crucial juncture in history, one must delve into the complex interplay of politics, sport, and the impending conflict that overshadowed all aspects of life, including the beautiful game of football. The late 1930s were marked by escalating tensions in Europe. The rise of totalitarian regimes, particularly in Germany and Italy, had begun to reshape the continent's political landscape. The echoes of these changes were felt in the realm of sports as well, with nations increasingly using events like the World Cup to assert their dominance and propagate ideological narratives. The 1936 Berlin Olympics, for instance, served as a striking example of sports being utilized as a tool for political propaganda. In this environment, the FIFA World Cup, which had been steadily growing in popularity and significance, found itself caught in the crosshairs of international politics. The 1938 World Cup in France had already given a glimpse of this entanglement, with Austria's withdrawal following the Anschluss with Germany, and Italy's team donning fascist uniforms during their victory parade. These incidents underscored the creeping influence of politics in the sporting arena. As discussions for the 1942 World Cup began, Europe's geopolitical situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Sudeten crisis in 1938.
They agree with Hitler that Germany can annex the German-speaking Sudetenland, but not make an attempt to invade the rest of Czechoslovakia.
And the subsequent Munich Agreement were ominous signs of the brewing conflict. In 1939, any hopes for a peaceful resolution were dashed as Germany invaded Poland, triggering the start of World War II.
Poland, September 1939. The German foe begins its ruthless march of conquest and sets the stage for World War II.
This marked a significant turning point, not only in global history, but also for the fate of the upcoming World Cup. Amidst this turmoil, FIFA found itself in a precarious position. The organization, which had hoped to continue the success of the previous tournaments, had to grapple with the realities of a continent plunging into war. Initial discussions had favored Germany as the host for the 1942 World Cup, following a promise made at the 1936 FIFA Congress. This decision, however, was increasingly questioned as the political situation in Germany and its aggressive foreign policy became more concerning. The onset of war brought with it a host of practical challenges for organizing an event like the World Cup. Travel restrictions, resource allocation, and the safety of players and spectators became pressing concerns. Countries were diverting their attention and resources to the war effort, leaving little room for international sports competitions. The notion of teams from warring nations competing on the football field seemed increasingly implausible. The dilemma facing FIFA was complex. On one hand, there was a desire to maintain the continuity of the World Cup and the spirit of international camaraderie it represented. On the other, there was the stark reality of a world at war, where such an event appeared disconnected from the suffering and chaos unfolding across the continent. As 1940 progressed, the situation worsened. The fall of France in June and the intensification of the Battle of Britain made it abundantly clear that hosting a World Cup in the midst of such conflict was not just impractical, but impossible. The dream of a 1942 World Cup slowly began to fade, overshadowed by the grim realities of warfare. The decision to cancel the 1942 World Cup was not taken lightly. It was a decision that reflected the somber mood of the times, a recognition of the fact that sport, however unifying, could not remain insulated from the upheavals of the world. It was a poignant moment in the history of the World Cup, a reminder that behind the spectacle of sport lay the more profound narrative of human history. In retrospect, the cancellation of the 1942 World Cup was a symbolic marker of the end of an era. It marked the disruption of a tournament that had come to symbolize international unity and sporting excellence. The impact of this cancellation was felt far beyond the football fields, resonating in the hearts of fans and players alike who had looked forward to the event as a beacon of hope and normalcy in increasingly troubled times. The shadow of war not only darkened the stadiums that would have hosted the matches, but also cast a long shadow over the spirit of the game. The cancellation was a stark reminder of the fragility of international events in the face of global conflict. It underscored the vulnerability of sports to the whims of politics and war, a vulnerability that would shape the future of the World Cup and its place in the world. The 1942 bid: promises, propaganda, and politics. The bid for the 1942 FIFA World Cup enmeshed in a complex web of promises, propaganda, and politics, unfolded against the backdrop of a Europe inching towards war. This chapter of the World Cup's history is not just about a football tournament. It's a narrative steeped in the geopolitical maneuvers and ideological battles of the late 1930s and early 1940s. In the mid-1930s, as the World Cup began to gain international prominence, the process of selecting a host for the 1942 tournament became entangled with the larger political machinations of the time. Germany, under the National Socialist regime, was eager to secure the hosting rights, seeing it as an opportunity to showcase their prowess and further their propaganda objectives.
The German strategy is to isolate Polish forces as quickly as possible. So the Nazi columns move according to prearranged schedule.
This desire was fueled by the success of the 1936 Berlin Olympics, which the regime had used effectively as a global stage for showcasing its ideology and might. The intrigue began in earnest at the 23rd FIFA Congress held in Berlin in August 1936. France was awarded the 1938 World Cup, but not without a tacit understanding that Germany would be the host in 1942. This decision was a delicate balancing act by FIFA, aiming to appease the growing power of Germany while maintaining a semblance of neutrality in an increasingly polarized world. As Europe moved closer to war, the bid for the 1942 World Cup became more than a sporting decision. It turned into a diplomatic chess game. Germany's ambitions were clear, but there were undercurrents of resistance. The notion of a World Cup in Nazi Germany was fraught with moral and ethical implications, given the regime's policies and aggressive stance in Europe. The tension was palpable, with the sporting community split between the desire to maintain the World Cup's spirit of international unity and the need to take a stand against the troubling developments in German politics. Despite these concerns, for a time, it appeared that Germany's bid might succeed. The country had the infrastructure, having recently hosted the Olympics, and there was a sense that a promise had been made. However, as the specter of war loomed larger, FIFA was forced to reconsider. The possibility of a World Cup being used as a tool for Nazi propaganda became an increasingly uncomfortable prospect. The situation was further complicated by the emergence of other potential hosts. Brazil, seeking to bring the World Cup to South America for the first time, presented a compelling alternative. This bid was not just about geography. It was a statement about the World Cup's global character and the need to move beyond the European-centric view of the sport. The Brazilian bid gained traction as the situation in Europe worsened. The outbreak of the Spanish Civil War in 1936 and the annexation of Austria by Germany in 1938 were clear indicators that the continent was on a path to broader conflict. FIFA found itself in a quandary, torn between the commitments made to Germany and the growing realization that a World Cup there could be untenable. By 1939, with Europe on the brink of war, the debates within FIFA reached a fever pitch. The organization was under immense pressure to make a decision that would not only determine the location of the World Cup, but also reflect its stance on the larger political issues at play. The choice was symbolic, representing a crossroads for both FIFA and the international community. In the end, the outbreak of World War II in September 1939 rendered all discussions moot. The invasion of Poland by Germany and the subsequent declarations of war by Britain and France made the idea of a World Cup in Germany or anywhere in Europe an impossibility. The dream of a 1942 World Cup was shattered, not by a decision in a boardroom, but by the harsh realities of a world at war. The shadow tournament, myths and realities. In the absence of the official 1942 FIFA World Cup, a fascinating tapestry of myths, anecdotes, and unofficial matches emerged, forming what many refer to as the shadow tournament. This chapter delves into the blend of fact and fiction surrounding these events, revealing the complexities and human stories within. The narrative of the shadow tournament is a mosaic of contested histories and whispered legends. Central to these tales is the idea that, despite the official cancellation of the World Cup, A series of football matches played during the war years constituted an unofficial shadow version of the tournament. These matches, often wrapped in myth, hold a peculiar place in the annals of football history. One of the most enduring stories is that of a final match allegedly played in 1942, attended by nearly 100,000 spectators. This tale, while captivating, blurs the lines between reality and myth. There is no concrete evidence to support the existence of such a match in the context of a substitute World Cup. However, the story persists, a testament to the enduring allure of the what-if scenarios that surround the cancelled tournament. Beyond the mythical final, the Shadow Tournament narrative is composed of various unofficial matches played across Europe during the war. These games were often organized under challenging circumstances, with players and teams navigating the harsh realities of wartime. They were not part of an organized tournament structure, but were imbued with a heightened sense of significance due to the absence of official international football competitions. One such example was a series of matches involving military teams and clubs from occupied territories. These games, while not officially sanctioned by FIFA, were fiercely competitive and carried a symbolic weight, representing small pockets of normalcy and resistance in a continent torn apart by conflict. In Germany, football continued under the regime's watchful eye, with matches often used for propaganda purposes. The German national team played several games during this period, achieving notable victories that were widely publicized by the regime. These matches, though not directly linked to the World Cup, were seen by some as a continuation of Germany's footballing ambitions, albeit in a drastically altered context. In other parts of Europe, football served as a form of passive resistance. In occupied territories, clandestine matches were organized, often at great personal risk. These games were more than mere sporting events. They were acts of defiance, symbols of hope and solidarity in the face of oppression. The question of whether these disparate matches could be considered part of an unofficial World Cup is a matter of interpretation. For some, they represent a shadow tournament, a parallel narrative running alongside the official history of the World Cup. For others, they are simply isolated episodes in the broader story of football during wartime. What is indisputable, however, is the impact of these matches on the collective memory of the sport. They highlight the resilience of football and its ability to provide a sense of purpose and community, even in the darkest of times. The Shadow Tournament also raises questions about the role of sport in times of conflict. These matches were not just about winning or losing. They were about the assertion of identity, the defiance of authority, and the search for normalcy in an abnormal world. They demonstrated the power of football to bring people together, even when the official channels of the sport were closed. Key figures and nations, the players of the unplayed game. In the phantom theater of the 1942 World Cup that never was, a cast of remarkable teams and individuals loom large, embodying the spirit of an era and the dreams unfulfilled. This chapter is a tribute to those key figures and nations, the would-be stars of a tournament that exists only in the realm of what could have been. Germany, anticipated as the host, was a formidable footballing nation, bolstered by the prowess of players like Fritz Walter, a name that would later resonate in World Cup history. The German team of this era was a blend of tactical acumen and physical strength, reflective of the regime's emphasis on athleticism and discipline. Hosting the World Cup would have been a crowning moment for German football, but history had other plans. Italy, under the guidance of coach Vittorio Pozzo, had won the previous two World Cups, 1934 and 1938, and was looking to secure an unprecedented hat-trick. The Italian squad, with stars like Giuseppe Meazza, was a powerhouse of tactical innovation and skill, embodying the Calcio at its peak. The 1942 tournament could have been their stage to solidify an unmatched legacy. Austria's Wunder team, once a symbol of footballing elegance and innovation, had been dispersed following the country's annexation by Germany in 1938. However, the individual brilliance of players like Matthias Sindelar, the paper man, known for his agility and intelligence on the field, lingered in the memories of fans. The absence of Austria as an independent team in 1942 was a poignant reminder of the era's political upheavals. Brazil was emerging as a force in world football, with the 1942 tournament seen as a potential turning point. Players like Leonidas da Silva, known for his athleticism and inventiveness, could have showcased the flair and rhythm that would come to define Brazilian football. The World Cup on Brazilian soil, which would eventually happen in 1950, was a dream deferred in 1942. Hungary, with its fluid attacking style of play, was ready to make a significant impact. The Hungarian team was at the forefront of tactical evolution, and a World Cup appearance could have been their opportunity to challenge the dominant forces of the era. England, despite being a birthplace of modern football, had not participated in the initial World Cups. However, by 1942, there were growing calls for their involvement. Players like Stanley Matthews, with his exceptional dribbling skills, could have graced the World Cup stage, adding a new dimension to the tournament. The Soviet Union, though a relatively unknown entity in international football, had a burgeoning football scene. The 1942 tournament could have been their introduction to the global stage, showcasing the talent from teams like Dynamo Moscow. Argentina, with its rich footballing heritage, was a potential challenger. The River Plate team of the era was producing players of extraordinary skill and vision, capable of rivaling the best in Europe. France, the hosts of the 1938 World Cup, had a team that combined physicality with technical skill. The French side, although not considered favorites, had the potential to surprise and had been looking forward to rectifying their. The United States, often viewed as outsiders in the football world, had made a surprising impact in the 1930 World Cup. Their continued participation could have added an intriguing element to the tournament. In the absence of the 1942 World Cup, these teams and players represent a spectrum of possibilities and lost chapters in football's history book. Each nation, with its unique style and tactical approach, would have brought something special to the tournament. The players, heroes in their own right, missed the chance to etch their names in the annals of World Cup glory. The impact of war on world soccer. The onset of World War II had a profound and far-reaching impact on the world of soccer, an impact that extended well beyond the cancellation of the 1942 FIFA World Cup. This chapter explores how the global conflict reshaped the landscape of the sport, affecting players, teams, national leagues, and international competitions. The most immediate and visible impact of the war was the suspension of international competitions, including the World Cup, with nations diverting resources to the war effort and travel becoming increasingly hazardous. Organizing global sporting events became impractical, if not impossible. The hiatus of these events left a void in the international sports calendar, deeply felt by fans and players alike. Within warring countries, national football leagues faced significant disruptions. Many were suspended or operated on a reduced scale due to the enlistment of players, bombings, and resource shortages. In countries like the United Kingdom, regional leagues and cup competitions were organized to maintain the sport amidst the chaos. These competitions, often featuring makeshift teams, provided a semblance of normalcy in turbulent times. The war had a profound personal impact on players. Many were enlisted into the military, and some lost their lives on the battlefield. Others were prisoners of war, like the legendary English player Sir Stanley Matthews, who spent time in a POW camp. The careers of many players were interrupted or cut short, and those who returned often found a vastly different footballing landscape. Football played a significant role in morale-boosting efforts during the war. Matches were organized for troops and civilians alike, serving as a welcome distraction from the grim realities of conflict. In countries under occupation, football matches became acts of defiance and symbols of national identity. The sport was also used for propaganda purposes, with regimes keen to demonstrate their nation's vigor and resilience through football. With many male players conscripted, women's football saw a significant surge during the war. In countries like the UK, women's teams were formed in factories and military units, playing to large crowds and raising funds for war efforts. This period marked a high point for women's football, though post-war social norms would see it sidelined again. The war also influenced the style and tactics of the game. The physical and psychological toll of the conflict, coupled with the disruption in training and competition, led to a more pragmatic, less flamboyant style of play in the immediate post-war years. This period saw a shift towards more tactical and team-oriented approaches, laying the groundwork for modern football strategies. The resumption of football after the war was not just about restarting leagues and competitions. It was about rebuilding a vital cultural and social fabric. The post-war period saw efforts to revive national leagues and re-establish international competitions. The 1950 World Cup, held in Brazil, symbolized the return of global football and was a testament to the sport's resilience. The war left an indelible mark on the world of soccer, with lessons about the sport's vulnerability and its power. It highlighted football's ability to unite people, even in the darkest times, and its potential to be manipulated for political ends. The post-war football landscape was one of reflection, renewal, and a rekindled spirit of international camaraderie. The aftermath, while others struggled to regain their pre-war prominence. The war had leveled the playing field to some extent, leading to a more diverse and unpredictable global football scene.